Hello, everybody. This is Paul from Off Grid Desert Farming with Paul and Adrian. This is February the 10th, Friday, 2023. And we have a new breaking news story for you this morning. And the news is not very good, but this article just came out probably about an hour ago that Russia is now formulating a response to the revelation of the Nord Stream bombing. Seymour Hersh put out a paper about 3 days ago. We reported this, claiming that the Biden administration planned the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline and that Russia is formulating a response. And there is secret negotiations going on right now between the United States. And if the negotiations fail, they said that Russia could possibly use nuclear weapons and will give a deadline of 72 hours to the United States and NATO to evacuate the area before they drop the nuclear bomb. So let's go ahead and get going on this article, folks. We've been warning about this for a very long time, that the United States has been poking the Russian bear, and now evidence has come out that they indeed had planned the Nord Stream pipeline demolition. So this is going to be, I guess, Russia's response. So what you're looking at on your screen is the article. It says Russia's response to Seymour Hersh's revelations. If the negotiations fail, Vladimir Putin will give a deadline of 72 hours before using nuclear weapons, 72 hours to evacuate the population of the nuclear strike zones. The first reaction we have from the deep Russian state to the revelation of the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh that Biden gave the order to blow up the Russian Nord Stream pipeline, which is an act of war, folks. This was an act of war against the Russian Federation. I mean, if Russia did this to our country, we would already be at war with them. So, there's consequences. There's consequences for your actions. And, hopefully this won't happen, but hopefully they will reach a peace agreement and the war will end soon, but no one really knows. He said Moscow, through a well-known Russian media, responds that if the ongoing secret negotiations fail, then a 72-hour evacuation period will be given to areas, and then the Russian army will regularly launch nuclear weapons. Obviously, the talk is about Western Ukraine. The title of the Russian article is 72 hours before the use of tactical nuclear weapons, what Russia should do after the traces or the evidence of the U.S. and the Nord Stream pipeline blown up were revealed. The article reads as follows. I would like to start today's material with excerpts from Sergei Sogu's statement dated 2/7, that is February the 7th, 2023. The date is different in Russia and Europe, folks. They put the day first, the month in the middle, and then the year. They don't do it like we do over here. So the date is February the 7th. He said business in the area of Uladar and Bakhmut are developing successfully. Russian forces are grinding all the weapons and equipment supplied to Ukraine on both delivery routes and combat positions. Ukrainian losses in January amounted to more than 6,500 military personnel, 26 aircraft, 7 helicopters, and 341 tanks. Soledar, Kleshkeva, Pogolno, Krasnopoli, I can't read these names, folks. You'll have to read them. Anyway, were liberated as a result of the offensive actions of the Russian troops. Demilitarization of NATO. What you need to notice here is that we have already dealt with the armed forces of Ukraine for a year of combat. Now the Russian Federation is demilitarizing NATO's military equipment. We are destroying 341 tanks per month, 26 aircraft, etc. How many tanks has NATO promised in Ukraine? Now just 321. This is only a month of work for the armed forces of the Russian Federation. British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace said London would not immediately transfer fighter jets to Ukraine. Transporting any fighter jets can take months, he said. Instead, Britain has promised long-range missiles and drones. The Kremlin believes that the supply of Western weapons to Ukraine testifies to the increasing involvement of some countries in the conflict and its transformation into a more painful one. The Baltic Sea and the legendary Seymour Hersh. Meanwhile, strange things are happening across the ocean, and I was sure that sooner or later the truth would come out. All versions indicated that behind the blowing up of the Nord Stream were the British Special Boat Services, abbreviated SBS, a special forces unit of the Royal Navy of Great Britain, created back in 1940 under the name the Special Boat Section of the British Army. Army Special Boat Section for anti-terrorist operations at sea. The sensational information was published on his website by the winner of the Pulitzer Prize, the highest award among journalists. Seymour Hersh, the personality, is a legendary figure in the journalism community. He received the Pulitzer Prize in 1970 for material exposing the American commandos who massacred the Vietnamese city of My Lai during the Vietnam War. The world then shuddered at the actions of the American army. It was a natural massacre. So remember that, folks. A lot of you are not old enough to remember that, but in 1970, we had American soldiers massacre a whole small village, My Lai massacre, and Seymour Hersh was the journalist who exposed that to the world. He said, in addition, Seymour Hersh is also the recipient of the National Council of Teachers of English in 2004, the George Orwell Award for Outstanding Contribution to Candor and Clarity in the Public Language, 2 National Magazine Awards, 5 George Polk Awards, and more than a dozen other awards for investigative journalism awards, making him a master in his field. Now he is 85 years old, and he is descended from Lithuanian Jews who moved to America in the middle of the last century. He published all his material based on information from anonymous sources, which he did not disclose. The CIA and the White House have long held a grudge against the freelance journalist who, in an era without blogs or internet sites, profitably sold his sensational revelations to America's leading media outlets. So he's been giving information out, it looks like, since the 1970s. He said he published all his, he said he wrote about the Watergate scandal, how the Secret Services in 1974 were involved in political investigations spying on anti-war activists, about the CIA's covert war in Chile. At the same time, in 1974, he published material on secret U.S. intelligence anti-submarine operations, talking about secret CIA operations to raise the sunken Soviet submarine from the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. He then promised CIA Director William Colby, who spoke with him, not to release this material until the end of the operation, and he kept his word. What followed was a series of revelations. Thus, in 2004, it was Hersh who first spoke about the torture of the Iraqis at the infamous American prison Abu Ghraib, which he received an angry reaction from the military and intelligence officers. So he's exposed a lot of things that we did, folks, a lot of bad things that we did as a country. So he is he's a well-respected reporter, won all these awards, and now he's exposing that Joe Biden administration planned and executed the demolition of the Nord Stream pipeline. He said he then attacked the CIA, which President Bush's Jr. approval, used illegal and harsh interrogation method, and a year later, in January 2005, it was Seymour Hersh who accused the United States of covert operations in Iran to identify targets for possible strikes and improve the involvement of Hillary Clinton, then Secretary of State. So let me get down to what is actually happening now. It says why this revelation was made now. Moscow now has a cause of war on its hands. Critics often accuse Hersh of constantly referring to anonymous sources and some classified documents that were given to him. Thus, former U.S. Defense Department spokesman Brian Whitman said, "This reporter has a well-established and well-deserved reputation for making dramatic statements based on unverified anonymous sources." Well, they all end up being true, though, aren't they, folks? Everything that he reported throughout his years of reporting were true. So he said, so let's go on down. So now let's Now let's think while somebody activated this case. Who he is, we don't know, but we can all guess. Undermining international infrastructure in international waters is a callous bell. He said Americans can scream for a long time that Hersh is a Russian agent, but let's first prove that the facts he reports are fake. We can pretend not to believe them, as Nikolai Khrushchev did, or we can stroke the fire by enlisting the aggravated German side for it. What we have here is the callous bell incident up our sleeve. We were attacked by the Americans. All this gives us the right to use nuclear weapons according to our own doctrine for their application. But we don't do that yet, trying to break our opponents in a friendly way. Here I would advise them not to forget the words of handsome Trump. Those who do not want it in a bad way, let them take into account that in a good way it will be worse. Said deadline 72 hours before using nuclear weapons. The game went on a collision course that you see now is an attempt to de-escalate by escalating the conflict. The board situation is nearing the end of the game, and the sides bring out their main trumps, which they say for the last minute they are trying to improve their bargaining position. The Kremlin is demonstrating its readiness to negotiate, and secret negotiations are underway. You can be sure of that. But if a deal fails, and he's talking about with the United States and NATO, the Kremlin will go all the way to the point of using tactical nuclear weapons and strategic weapons. The West, or the United States and NATO, does not believe this. But when Moscow gives 72 hours to evacuate the population of a nuclear strike zone, then they will believe it. I hope it will not come to that. So this is the latest article that we have coming out from War News 24/7, that the Russians, if the negotiations for a peace treaty doesn't happen soon, then Russia is saying that they have the right to use nuclear weapons to escalate to de-escalate, what basically they're saying. So we have some more news. This has come out on AP that Russia could adopt the U.S. preemptive strike. So news has just come out that Russia is about to change their nuclear doctrine to a first strike nuclear doctrine, that they could amend their constitution to use a first strike to escalate to de-escalate. That means that they would do this to tell us in NATO that if you keep going, then we will use our big nuclear weapons. So what you're looking at on your screen has just come out in the last couple of days from AP News. AP News is reporting this information, and let's read along. Putin says Russia could adopt preemptive strike concept. Russian President Vladimir Putin said Friday, that is today, that Moscow could adopt what he described as a U.S. concept of using preemptive military strikes, noting it has the weapons to do the job in a blunt statement amid rising Russian NATO tensions over Ukraine. We are just thinking about it. They weren't shy to openly talk about it during the past years, Putin said, referring to the U.S. policy as he attended a summit in Kyrgyzstan of a Moscow-dominated economic alliance of ex-Soviet nations. For years, the Kremlin has expressed concern about U.S. efforts to develop the so-called conventional prompt global strike capability that envisions hitting an adversary's strategic targets with precision-guided conventional weapons anywhere in the world within an hour. Speaking about a disarming strike, maybe it's worth thinking about adopting the ideas developed by our U.S. counterparts, their ideas of ensuring their security, Putin said with a thin smile, noting that such a preemptive strike would be intended to knock out command facilities. He claimed that Russia has already commissioned hypersonic weapons capable of carrying out such a strike, while the U.S. hasn't yet even deployed them. He also claimed that Russia now has cruise missiles that surpass their U.S. equivalents.